My guest today from 620 WTMJ. Hear him in the mornings, Wisconsin's morning news from 6 to 9 a.m. He is Vince Vitrano. Vinny,
great to be here.
Yeah,
why
thank
am
you
I
so
here
much.
again?
Because you said yes. That's the reason. Because you said yes.
All
Had you
right.
said no, then so really,
Then I would not be here.
Correct. This is all your fault.
This is a podcast, correct?
Podcast, video cast. Yeah.
Good. Am I free to swear then? We can't swear on the air.
Yeah. So technically, probably, but we try to. Best practices.
This is a classy podcast.
ESPN is still associated; those 4 letters still associated with this podcast. Okay. So, if you can, if we can just avoid it. If not, look, I do a show with 2 people in the mornings on 94.5 who like to drop one every now and then.
But you have Ashton for that. Who
I do.
Is on the
correct. Yeah. I got him, and I don't have him for this.
And you don't want post-production here after the. I don't want to complicate this.
I would assign it to you because you're the TV guy.
Okay.
Then they just trust me with a camera. That's all I have access to.
Then we're going to play it without swears. Because my first question was going to be, of the people that you've chosen to be a part of this, and thank you for asking, because I'm a Packer fan and have long since been watching our team.
Yep.
So glad you asked. But you gave me, but for if I didn't know and appreciate the significance of the outcome of the game, for investing a couple of hours in rewatching, not a great game.
No, but at least you got to win. You got to win.
Did you assign losses?
So the one we had last week was myself and Jason Wilde. The Packers lost against the Cowboys in 2007, but it was the game where Aaron Rodgers came in after Brett Favre got hurt.
Okay.
On the docket, so I guess to steal a phrase from Wilde and Tausch, scheduled to appear Craig Karmazin and Mark Chmura doing the Fail Mary.
Okay.
Because there were some ESPN Milwaukee promo tie-ins.
Right?
Yeah, the Fail Mary. So 2 losses as part of this group of 10 games. So you got to win.
I did.
So
get
that's good.
If I had to choose a loss also to put in your thing, I covered. And so I went to school at St. Norbert, and I worked Packers training camp as a kid or college kid for a couple of seasons. And that I parlayed into somehow while still in college, the staff writing job for a thing that was called the Packer Insider.
I remember the Packer Insider.
Later merged with Packer Report, right? But so I'm in college and got a chance to actually do sports journalism. And for whatever reason, I don't know if somebody dropped out or what, but they sent me to
somebody dropped out. Not you didn't do anything good on your own volition. Somebody else messed up somewhere else.
I was a junior in college. How much good? Really? They're glad I showed up. They sent me to Dallas that year for Thanksgiving. This was just as we were beginning to reemerge. So what, 94?
That was 1994.
And we went to Dallas where we could not win.
Nope.
Year after year after year. Our hopes and dreams went there to die. And this was the game where Troy Aikman was hurt.
Yep.
So some red-haired kid named Jason Garrett was going to start.
Yeah.
So for sure win. Reggie, God healed his shoulder on the training table, that whole storyline. So it was all good. And the Packers came from ahead to lose in the second half.
I believe Alvin Harper had a very large game from a lot of long passes from Jason Garrett. In that
Terrell Buckley was in the defensive backfield.
Yep.
Had himself a game.
Yeah.
So, all right, put that one on the docket.
Okay, we'll put that on the docket for future.
This is me helping you with your podcast.
For future. So the reason why, the game that we gave you, and I guess by we, I mean me.
Okay.
When I was making out the list of games I wanted to do for RePackables, I feel that the game I gave you gets lost to history a little bit. And the game that we're reviewing today is the final game, regular season finale, January 2nd, 2011 of the 2010 season. The Packers win and they're in, and they host the Chicago Bears at Lambeau Field. And a lot of the wacky stuff happened before this. There was a Deshaun Jackson punt return for a touchdown as the Eagles beat the Giants. The Lions beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And there were just so many tiebreakers that had to fall the Packers' way. And they had over the course of the previous couple of weeks, because they were in a hole because at the beginning, 4 weeks left in the season, Aaron Rodgers gets a concussion in Detroit. They lose that game 7-3. Well, now he's got to sit out. It was the second concussion of the year. Packers go Sunday Night Football to New England. Matt Flynn has to start the game, plays admirably.
Yes.
Almost wins the game, but the Packers lose. So they lose 2 in a row. And now they're, oh man, how are we going to get in the playoffs sitting there at 8-6? Beat the brakes off of the New York Giants the week before. to kind of set the table. And then they had all these other tiebreaker games fall their way. So it wasn't, oh, watch the scoreboard. This set up a win and you're in situation. And the Bears, to their credit, played their starters the entire game. It's almost as if Lovie Smith knew, hey, because they had already been locked into the 2 seed. They knew where they were the 2 seed. Atlanta won earlier in the day, so they were going to be the 1. Chicago was going to be the 2, get the bye. But it's almost as if Lovie Smith went, hey, A, we've got the bye next week. B, let's make sure that this team, who just played as well as they did last week, we don't want to see them again in the postseason.
You always hear about teams that are dangerous. What's the 5 seed, 6 seed that's a sleeper pick, whatever? Because of course the model is, and I wonder if it still is, but the model is you want to get that number 1 seed. Now it used to be the top 2 seeds where you get the bye week, you get to rest, you get home field, which hasn't worked out particularly well for the Packers in recent history anyway. But to your point, the Packers were hoping at best to sneak in and be the 6th seed. The Bears already knew there was nothing they could do to improve their station. But yes, almost prophetic of Lovey knowing if this team gets into the tournament, as they say, they could be dangerous. And boy, was he right.
Yeah, and Troy Aikman, so it was Buck and Aikman. It was a Fox game, 3:25 start. You got Buck and Aikman on the call. And the entire game, Aikman was singing the praises of, hey, if this team gets in, as well as Aaron Rodgers has been playing, nobody wants to see this team. So it's easy to kind of look back as, a team that's a 6 seed would go on to win the Super Bowl. Be like, yep, that's the team nobody wanted to, play. But in the moment, Aikman was saying that throughout the course of the game, kind of proving that maybe he doesn't take the Packers after all.
What's interesting is you did not see many indications this game, as it's one sample size, that this was going to be the team that then runs the table from the 6th seed in the playoffs, because the final was 10-3 Packers.
It was ugly.
Not a ton of
ugly
offense.
Game. It was, the Packers were able to move the ball early. They had a fumble in there. But so kind of going into this game, so much because of what coaching is. Like you stick around one place, like the Bill Belichick's, the Mike Tomlins, like it's so very rare. So the Mike McCarthy era clearly did not end well in Green Bay. Neither did the Dom Capers era. However, this defense was so good. This was year 2 of Dom Capers in Green Bay, and this defense is flying around, making plays. And it's easy to remember the bad times because that's how it ended for, again, the Fire Dom Capers era. It felt like that was trending on Twitter for, every Sunday for 2 or 3 years at the end of the Dom Capers era. And the Mike McCarthy, his relationship with Rodgers ended up kind of going sideways, got a little stale, and they had to go and move on. But both of these guys were at the height of their games, because you see Dom Capers, he was doing so many different things, so many different blitzes trying to get in Jay Cutler's head. And Mike McCarthy, I know he got, a lot of blame for his offense getting stale, but at this point in time, they had so many different personnel packages, from 5 wide, 2 fullbacks, full house backfields, and everything in between. Like he did a very good job in this era, and it's easy to forget, of keeping teams off balance because all the different personnel packages that they had.
And that defense, if you can go back to it, just gave up a lot of yards, gave up big plays, but got turnovers better than any defense I recall in recent history. And you mentioned a couple of the guys. Nick Collins was still in that backfield.
Watching him.
Oh, so good. And his career cut too short. Charles Woodson, who I love to watch Charles. He was one of my favorite defenders because not only was he the blitz guy, and towards the end of the ball game, I think Aikman said at one point, they're going to send Charles Woodson again. They were virtually sending him on every play.
He was coming off the slot, just blitzing.
I mean, right. It wasn't even a trick anymore. It was just like, well, Chuck's coming and we're going to have to figure it out. And they never did. So, and what I loved about Charles Woodson and how he played, though, from that cornerback position and a safety as well, he stuck his head in there.
Oh, man.
This cat was not afraid to hit people.
No.
He had a lot of tackles. He was very physical, and I just loved that about him. He was in everything. And then on the defensive front, well, Sam Shields was also back there.
He was a rookie that year, so you had Sam Shields, Tremont Williams, like the entire backfield. Like Charlie Pepra was a substitute because Morgan Burnett had gotten hurt. And Pepra even had an interception in this game in the first half in the end zone, which was pretty big. So he ends up playing a big role. It just seemed like with that defense, even though they had all the injuries and they constantly mentioned the Cullen Jenkins injury, as he was hurt for a big chunk of that regular season, it just seemed like everybody kind of had their different moments throughout the course of the game because, again, the defense was just so good in 2010.
B.J. Raji up front, I mean, the closest thing to the Gravedigger that we had, although even probably more mobile. And then fast forwarding to that game against Chicago, has the
Interception.
Pick six
Six.
for PJ Raji. You're kidding me. When that happened, it was like, we're going.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way this doesn't happen. So what an amazing defense. Frustrating and tough to watch because they still did, under Dom Capers, allow a lot of yards. But as Dom would always say, this is a defense designed to get turnovers. And it works when that happens. When it doesn't, then it gets to be ugly.
And they had big plays, not just in the turnovers, but sacks. They ended up with 6 sacks in this game. And Clay Matthews had, when you mentioned Charles Woodson, Eric Walden, who? Yeah, exactly. Who you probably don't remember, even if you watched every game in 2010. He was the starting linebacker opposite of Clay Matthews. He had 2.5 sacks in this game. It was just they were constantly putting pressure on Jay Cutler, which led to the turnovers. And then you throw it up when you've got playmakers like Nick Collins, Sam Shields, Charles Woodson, Tramon Williams in the back end of that defense. I understand why, if I'm Dom Capers, I am blitzing everyone all the time because – okay, maybe you get a big play, but next time you're going to rush that throw, and one of those 4 guys is going to come away with the football.
And talking about guys you don't know or remember, on the offensive side, a couple of guys I wrote down. I mean, James Starks, was he the starter that year?
So he was not. So he was
running back,
he ended up being the starter in the
Split
run to the
time,
Super
right,
Bowl
with Brandon Jackson.
So James Starks, as a 6th-round pick out of Buffalo that year, started the season on PUP. I think he had an ankle injury. So he didn't play like the first 6 games or whatever. Then he had a hamstring injury. He was like sparingly playing. And his first breakout game was the week after this game. In the wild card round, when he ran for over 100 yards, it was the first time he'd ever done that. He did in a playoff game on the road in Philadelphia. Yeah. So like James Starks, again, like at this point was still a very much unknown. Brandon Jackson had been a 2nd-round pick the year before. Never really took off in his Green Bay career. They kept trying to run the football to no avail. They could not run the football in this game.
It was more to set up the play action, but too, if you're not running effectively, why even bother defending against that? But also John Kuhn in the backfield.
I mean,
Kuhn,
the dude's a full hero. Yeah.
They're saying Kuhn.
Well, and they showed his stats from the week before because he had 2 touchdowns. He scored 2 touchdowns against the Giants, but it was like 6 carries, 20 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was just the vulture, and they tried to give him another one at the goal line. So the Packers only had 2 drives where they scored points. They scored 10 points. Right. And they get down to the 1-yard line the first time. They try to run it in with Kuhn, couldn't get it in, ultimately settled for a field goal to tie. So they tried to get Kuhn another touchdown, couldn't quite do it in this game. But that was his role, where he was that touchdown, kind of a poor man's Mike Allstott, if you remember. Yes. Mike Allstott from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the early 2000s.
With Allstott.
Sure. It was a great Berman. That was a great Berman one-liner. But it's been fun to kind of go back and look, because even though that first half was pretty ugly, the Bears are leading 3-0 at the end of the half. Seeing Aaron Rodgers and just how, he's got command of the offense, not quite the command he would eventually get when he becomes the MVP in 11, 14, and so on and so forth. But watching him operate within that offense with so many different personnel packages, you get a free play out of it. He didn't hit it, but you get the Aaron Rodgers hard count free play. Just some of the old throwbacks that maybe you forgot about, just a little bit with the modern Aaron Rodgers.
The other thing that you like to watch is, because we got so accustomed to the later Aaron Rodgers after all the hype, after the MVPs, and he was a little bit more strictly running Mike McCarthy's offense. You can say for better or for worse. I think a lot of us would argue for better, because this was a point where he was still growing into that role. And so he was running the plays largely, not that he did an audible here and there, but largely was running the offense as it was called. And it worked.
Yeah.
How about that?
The other thing, and I talked about this last week with Jason, prime Greg Jennings, boy, was he was, again, another guy whose time in Green Bay ended poorly because he goes to Minnesota, says the Packers brainwashed him.
Says a bunch of dumb stuff.
Says a bunch of dumb stuff even after he then goes on TV, tries to build a media career for himself. But holy crap, was he so much fun to watch once he had the ball in his hands.
So you have Greg Jennings, Donald Driver still a part of that team.
James Jones.
Jordy Nelson.
Jordy Nelson was a rookie that year.
Think about those names that are now in the Packers Hall of Fame, a couple of those guys. That's an amazing receiver core that you often do. Well, Aaron Rodgers never had the tools. They never gave him the tools. That's some pretty good guys in there.
Oh, and I think that was just more of an end of the line thing, because the one thing that Ted Thompson was always really good at was kind of making sure that wide receiver position was replenished and restocked. And their tight ends weren't spectacular. Donald Lee had a couple of good years, had the lone touchdown in this game for the Packers.
That was another who?
Yeah.
Like, who grabbed that?
Andrew Corliss was one of their tight ends, at this point. But, it goes back, and this is part of the point I've been making all off season. When Favre came in, you had young receivers. You had Robert Brooks, and then eventually, Antonio Freeman. But Brett still had Sterling, and he was able to kind of grow with Sterling. When Aaron first came in, you got Greg Jennings there, and then James Jones and Jordy. But you had Double D. You had Donald Driver as that veteran presence. Jordan Love doesn't have that. We'll see if that ends up impacting him at all, but it just makes me a little uneasy. But, you think of when Rodgers takes over and you've got Jennings and you've got Driver, and then you get James Jones, Jordy Nelson. After this year, in the second round, they take Randall Cobb. In 2014, second round, they take Davante Adams. So the one thing that they constantly were doing was kind of backfilling that wide receiver position. And at least under Ted Thompson, they always kind of made sure, it wasn't a first-round pick, but you're telling me Greg Jennings wasn't really good? He was multiple-time Pro Bowler. Donald Driver's the all-time leading receiver in franchise history. Jones was solid. Jordy is one of the best receivers in Packers history, and Davante Adams is on a Hall of Fame track.
Right.
So they did a really good job. It wasn't first-round picks, but the scouting department and Ted Thompson did a really good job of backfilling that position.
You mentioned Ted, so this is obviously the year then after the Packers run the table in the NFC playoffs. They go to the Super Bowl. It's in Dallas. And they sent me to Ted Thompson's. I went to cover it for TMJ4. Sent me to Ted Thompson's hometown of Atlanta, Texas. So I was told.
Where is Atlanta, Texas? Just for, because clearly everybody's heard of Atlanta, Texas. I'm sure everybody watched your story back in 2010.
Partner Texarkana. So it's all the way, you're headed east, basically due east from Dallas, if I remember right. And it was 2.5, 3+ hours. Okay. Now, what I had been told, hey, we're just going to have you zip on over. It's pretty close to Dallas. I had never bothered to look at the map. It's all set up. You're just going to go there. You're going to meet Ted Thompson's brother. He's going to talk to you, and they're going to have you out at the house. It's in Atlanta, Texas, small town there. And they're going to talk all about Ted Thompson. I'm like, okay, cool. It's all taken care of. It's all set up. We hit the ground on a Saturday afternoon in Dallas. I'm like, this is my first story, my assignment. But I had like a day to get a bunch of stories in the can ready to go for the Super Bowl for when we kicked off our big coverage on Monday, right? So I'm like, okay, it's a little bit of a drive, but we're good. It was 2.5, if not a hard 3. So I'm already doing the math in my head. I'm going 6 hours just in the car to get one story. Meanwhile, Mike Jacobs, he's over at the NFL Experience. He's got like 7 stories in the can.
Yeah.
He's crushing. We get out to Atlanta, Texas, and I can't get a hold of Ted's brother.
Oh, no.
I got one phone number and ain't nobody answering.
Yeah.
3 hours outside Dallas. I'm here. So I say to my buddy, my photographer, Mike Lammy, I'm like, Mike, let's just go into town.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, small town. They got to be, there's got to be bad. Good luck, Ted, Texas own guy, whatever. We go into town. Ain't nobody heard of Ted Thompson. Like, there's nothing. It's just like a classic small. The downtown is kind of dilapidated and boarded up. There's nowhere to go. Short story now made long. My apologies, but it's a podcast. So
we got time.
We randomly start running into a couple of people. We're like, yeah, I know. You know what you need to do? You need to talk to this guy. He played football with Ted in high school. We ended up on some guy's ranch. He knew Ted, had the picture in the yearbook. Here he is. There's Ted, told us a couple of things about him. But, man, what a disaster. We're on our way back. So it turned out to be not a bad story, a couple of folks. But it wasn't like, as you would expect with Ted, because he was such an understated guy. It was like, oh, yeah, he's from here. So we're driving back. It's now pitch black. It's night. I got one story out of a day where I should have had 6 or 7, like getting stuff ready to go. And Jacobs calls me. He's like, well, here's what we did. We went to the NFL Experience. I found the company that makes the Super Bowl rings. They have a display of rings. I talked to this guy here. I talked to this vendor here. There's a Packers bar just outside of Dallas. We went there. We did a story. I got this. How'd you do? I said, well, Jake, not too effing good. I got one story.
I talked to 2 guys.
I got to talk to a couple guys who maybe once knew Ted Thompson. But it's going to be great. Please watch anyway.
But, that's who Ted was. He was an understated guy. And, there was so much for this game. So much on this line for the game. The offense is playing terrible. At the end of the first half, it's 3-0.
3-0.
They're just punting. They had the one turnover. Driver ended up having a fumble. Aaron Rodgers ends up throwing an interception. A great play by Peanut Tillman, who another great defender.
That Bears defense was pretty darn good, too.
Oh, my
A couple
goodness.
of names on there. I mean,
Briggs.
Urlacher was still in there.
Yep, Urlacher.
Julius Peppers on the end.
Yeah, I mean, that Bears defense was legit. It's really what kind of carried them, and Jay Cutler was still Jay Cutler
Not
at that
great
point.
Quarterback play.
No, not great quarterback play. Is again, they had opportunities to put away after that interception by Rodgers that Tillman returns inside the 20. I'm watching it back. I'm like, wait, how do they get out of this? Like, I know that the Bears only scored 3 points. They already have those 3 points. And he throws a pretty careless interception to Pepra in the end zone. And the Packers just could not get their offense. They had the 2 drives, end of the third quarter, into the fourth quarter. They just could not get the offense out of neutral.
It feels like we've seen that movie. Well, we saw that movie before, and it repeated itself through the Mike Holmgren era, a little bit through here into Matt LaFleur's era as well. It was just this common theme of here and there you'd see signs of the juggernaut where, and later you would have, I mean, we boat raced Atlanta.
Yeah,
in the divisional round before going on to Chicago. It's like, where's that offense every week?
They had scored 45 points the week before at home against the Giants. Rodgers threw for 404 yards. Jordy had over 120 receiving yards. They just absolutely unleashed an offense on a team that was trying to get into the playoffs, just like the Packers and the Giants the week before.
And that was the offense that showed up for almost the entirety of the following season. And the 2011 season, is that the 15-1 year?
It's the 15-1 year.
I mean, everything was happening right. I can't even remember who the loss was to.
Kansas City.
Oh, okay.
They had just fired their coach, and they ended up with now I'm blanking on the coach's name, but he ended up being the interim. They kind of rallied around him. The offense sputtered, and they only scored like 14 points.
Which you're gonna have. You're gonna have a donkey or two in a season,
fine. And that was what was so fun about this team. Was that the Packers offense didn't play great today, and not today, in the game that we watched on the day that they were playing it, January 2nd, back in 2011. But the defense was just so good. And it happened again. Like the offense played pretty well against Philly. Boat raced, played fantastic, spectacular against Atlanta. But the offense struggled again when they played Chicago in the NFC Championship game. But the defense was there once again, just kind of proving that, especially in this era of NFL football, you needed that complete package. You needed a really good offense, but you needed a defense that could bail you out if the offense wasn't sharp.
And like I said, that a defense that gave up yards, that gave up big plays, but what they did that other defenses of late have not is they made those big plays. They made the interceptions. They got the turnovers. And that's where things get ugly, right? I don't mind giving up yards. That's exciting football to watch. It's fun to be a little bit frustrated if then down the road, then there comes the pick. Then there comes the fumble recovery. Then there comes the strip sack, whatever it is. But just that's something that the defense has not been able to do in recent years is be that turnover generating defense.
And even then, you just have to create pressure. I mean, it seems easy to say, but they created so much pressure on the quarterback as well. Well, now all of a sudden it's 2nd and 18, and okay, now you feel good about getting the stop, forcing the punts, and getting the football back that way. So it's not even just necessarily the turnovers; it was the quarterback pressure with all the different blitz packages that Dom Capers would come up with that allowed them to get out of some advantageous situations. Now there was also a moment in this game where they got a little lucky. Where Lovie Smith called a timeout.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what was happening there?
So 3rd and 12, play clock is running down for the Chicago Bears, and they're getting closer and closer to midfield. And it's 3rd and 12, play clock is running down. They tried to break it down the best they could on the broadcast. They were having trouble. I think this assistant coach called timeout, and then Lovie decided to call timeout because nobody heard a whistle. And the other thing that I noticed during the course of this game, I don't remember the last time Lambeau was that rocking.
It was really loud. I made that same observation.
Over the broadcast, you're like, holy cow. Like, this is Lambeau's awesome. Rocking. This is awesome to watch. And so nobody hears a whistle. They play out the down. It ends up being a little dump off pass to Matt Forte, who picked up the first down and picked up 13 yards on 3rd and 12. Well, at the end of the play, you see one of the Packers defenders is back pointing like, oh, maybe there's a flag. No, it was Lovie Smith went to the side judge and he called a timeout. So 3rd and 12 didn't happen. Packers get a sack on the next play, punt it, and Chicago ends up having to punt it away.
So delicious. There are plenty of Bears fans in that crowd as well.
Oh, yeah.
We had lost we lost game 1 to the Bears earlier in the season. Is
That's
that right?
correct. Yes, in Chicago.
Which we don't much care to do. I mean, in the Lovie Smith era, how many times did he beat the Packers? 3?
Yeah, not many.
And he's done better than most.
Yeah. Over the last 20 years, he was spectacular.
Guy who came in and said at his first news conference, we're going to beat the Packers.
Yeah. And well,
we love you.
Yeah.
Miss you.
I do. I miss him. I miss Cutler. Not so many of those players on the defense, but I miss a lot of those players offensively because it always worked out for the Packers. But there were a couple of throws by Aaron Rodgers then in that little stretch where the offense kind of clicked and they got the 3 points for the field goal and then the touchdown to Donald Lee. The one that set up the touchdown to Donald Lee was Greg Jennings against a cover 2 up the right sideline where Rodgers draws the safety away just enough to fit it into a not very big window 46 yards down the field.
Basket catch, if I remember right, right, just right here, but put it right on his hands. And you're right, drawing with his eyes or whatever he did, that safety who was supposed to be helping out came in late. I can't remember who it was, but I saw that too. It was
Danielle Manning.
He just took one little, and that's all it took. He took one wrong step and then, whoa, he was hustling back.
Oh, and he's the one who ended up making the tackle, but he had created enough gap. And it was just so much fun to kind of watch Aaron Rodgers, and you hope you can have that kind of fun with Jordan Love this year. But of course, at the end of the game, as it seems like the case is with many Packers games over the last, I don't know how many every years of the Aaron Rodgers era, it still has to come down to the defense. And they pin the Bears deep, and the Bears move the ball okay at times, but they start putting together their best drive of the game. Yeah. They're inside the 5, pick up a first down. Greg Olsen starts coming alive with a couple of nice catches, and they start pushing the ball down the field. It was, they got the ball back with just under 5 minutes left, and they marched the ball all the way down inside about the 30-yard line of the Packers. And this thing, you're sweating this thing out. I remember sweating it out. It was the day after New Year's. I had gone back to my parents' house in Horicon. I don't know if we had some New Year's party or whatever I did the day before. Who could say? Who could say at this point? And I remember being on my parents' couch watching that game, even though I was working in Madison, living in Madison at the time, and jumping off my couch in jubilation when Nick Collins finally brought that thing to an end with an interception with about 20 seconds
How many
left.
games that season ended in exactly that same way? Didn't even the Super Bowl end that same way or close to it?
So,
Still took yet another defensive
Well, because you felt like you dominated the entire game,
yes.
yet the Steelers got the ball back.
You were
2 minutes left. Yeah, you're just like, oh, man. And the defense has been so good, you should have faith in them. But in the NFL, you just never know in the final 2 minutes.
That's the thing. If you pick a difference between McCarthy and Matt LaFleur in terms of philosophy, I felt like so many times we got in those situations where you're like, 1 first down and we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Offense has the ball. There's, clock's ticking away. 1 first down and we're good. And Mike, is trying to run clock. And sometimes the play calling was, let's run John Kuhn into a lineman's ass 3 times, gain 3 yards in 4 plays, and punt.
But we ran almost 2 minutes off the clock.
Yeah, right. Yes. And now you see LaFleur more willing to throw, and we control this right here. And I know it's risky because you throw a pick and then what are you doing? Throw the ball.
Incomplete pass stops the clock. Those things always factor in.
But it just felt like so many times over the years we had the ball. All you need is a first down, maybe 2. Just possess the ball here down the stretch.
Well, because they scored the touchdown early fourth quarter to take the 10-3 lead. And then they got some pretty good field position. There was one where they started on the Bears side of the 50. Yes. And you're going, all right, offense has figured it out. Here we go. Just sputter out. Can't even get the field goal range.
Up, yeah. Right. At least put 3 up, and then a touchdown can't tie it.
But it all worked out in the end because the Green Bay Packers ended up winning the game 10-3. What was you shared your memory of being then down at the Super Bowl. What's the one thing that always stands out to you? Because again, I feel like that run in the postseason just gets so much love, as it should, because it was a spectacular run to win those 4 games to win a championship. Of the 4 games that follow, what's the thing that stands out to you the most?
In terms of the game was the aforementioned term boat race in Atlanta, which was when I started to believe we actually could win the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Not just happy to be here, not great growth for Aaron Rodgers, this is for real.
That was the number 1 seed that they went into and scored 48 points.
It was over early, ugly quickly, as they say. So it was that, and then honestly, the enduring play of the whole thing was the BJ Raji pick six.
Oh, 100%.
I mean,
100%.
so fun, so great in Chicago. That guy, and then the little.
He did like the hula dance. I don't know what that was, but
neither did he. But
yeah.
it was delicious.
It was, and honestly for me too. It's the Raji play because I that entire run during that playoff. So I'm living in Madison. I drove to Milwaukee because we got so superstitious during that run. Me and my buddies.
That's important. Respect the streak, Gabe.
My buddy lived on the east side. Like I had a buddy coming down from Minnesota for 3 of those 4 playoff games. And we decided we all had to watch, all of us old college roommates had to watch it all together. But the one thing I remember after they beat the Chicago Bears is us talking about, man, if they win the Super Bowl, that's going to be great. But we always beat the Bears in an NFC championship game. We beat the biggest rival we have in order to go to that.
Yes.
That's something that we can always remember is beating the Bears in Chicago en route to a Super Bowl.
In their house.
And that Raji play was the one that sealed it. So that's the play that always stands out to me in terms of that entire Super Bowl run.
I feel like, it wasn't against us. The double doink where the Bears lost in the Bear mascot in the
just for comedic effect.
That's so good.
I'm
That's
sure Bears
great
fans
mascot
hate
work.
It. Oh, it's great
really
mascot
solid
work.
But I feel like that collectively, that image also was at play there because the Bears were, gate to gate the better team for the season. Yeah, we got that win. You could easily say like, we weren't throwing everything at you, and they had the home field, and you go in there and it's their people. And it had to be us.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb Haney played in that NFC Championship game. I'm sure if we ever do a playoff version of Repackables, that NFC Championship game is certainly going to be in there because there's a lot of things that happened in there I think that get lost to history as well. But
I'm happy to accept 4th and 26 if you want because I was at that one too, and so
that one's a little more heartbreaking. Yeah, that one's a little more heartbreaking. We talked about it a little bit with Tausch.
Yeah. Because
that came 4th and 26 came after again, I thought that was a team of destiny.
It was.
Favre passes away. Favre plays like he did. They get the miracle the next week with Poole.
Yeah.
They get we're going to take the ball. Poole.
That's right. That was the last regular season.
Yeah, that was the last game of the regular season.
Right.
Poole beats the Vikings. Yeah. Poole beats the Vikings on the last second on a rule that doesn't even exist because you can force someone out now. Then you get Hasselbeck the next week. We're going to take the ball. We're going to score. He throws the pick six to Al Harris. So you're feeling great. And then 4th and 26.
It all had to be. That was talk about a magical run. You're right. The team of destiny, all of those things, everything I forgot about Poole. You talked about being in a place. I remember being at then TGI Fridays at then Miller Park. We had a friend in from out of town. And when people are in from out of town, I always like to take them to the restaurant because it's a cool spot to be.
Oh, yeah. You see
look
outside
at our stadium. Cool. So my wife has a friend in from out of town, college friend, and we're just there for a fun place to watch the game. We knew a couple other people there, so we were sitting at the table. Packers game was already over, yet the broadcast is still on now. The Vikings and the Cardinals, right? And they're marching on down. And when Poole catches that touchdown and essentially – Packers are in, Vikings are knocked out of the playoffs, and the place erupts.
Yeah.
As you would know, I'm hugging everybody in the place, high fives around. My wife's friend said, who are all those guys? She's like, what guys? She's like, I saw Vince. He's like, at that table, does he know everybody in the place? We didn't know any of those people. She was confused. Didn't know any of those people.
No, it was just Packers fans.
Fans. We won.
So I was at that game. I was a senior in high school. Went up to that game with a bunch of buddies. We didn't have tickets. 4 of us found 2 guys found tickets together. One buddy found a single ticket. I found a single ticket.
Nice.
So I would go to the game, surrounded by strangers, and the entire final 5 minutes of the game because the Packers blew the doors off the Broncos. Everyone's
watching the monitors.
Well, they're trying to get reaction out of the booth, the suites above you.
Yeah.
You're trying to get some sort of action because they had TVs because Sherman had banned putting the score up on the scoreboard. So nobody knew. I don't know how it happened, but at one point, just like a wave starts coming down of we're celebrating. We think that clearly the Vikings must have lost, and then finally they flash on the scoreboard. Packers NFC North champions 2003. So we're going crazy, and then I had to meet up with my buddies on the other side of the stadium. My hand has never hurt so much. Everyone, boom, 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 just giving out high fives like it's my job walking to the other side of the stadium. It was so jubilaic. But that was 2003. This was 2010. And I'm sure a lot of people had that same reaction after beating the Bears to end the regular season.
Set up perfectly. All good.
Vinny,
all right, you gave me a fine assignment.
I did, yeah. And at the end, it all worked out.
I changed my mind. I liked it.
At the end, it all worked out. Vinny, appreciate you joining me for RePackables.
Anytime.
All right, make sure you join us once again. Next week, we'll be reviewing another game as all part of RePackables, all part of Pack Summer, right here on ESPN Wisconsin. And you're talking with Truman McGee of Funky Fresh Spring Rolls. All right, so how did Funky Fresh get started?
Yeah, so 10 years ago, almost to the day, I was a laid-off construction worker, had to move back into my parents' house and restart my life. I was almost 30, going bald, overweight, all the things that men are afraid of. And I say, no, I need to do something with my life. So I started literally making healthier meals out of my parents' kitchen. From there, like my father was a Vietnam vet, like man's man. He loved these sweet potato and black bean spring rolls. And I thought, like, my dad loved it, anybody loved it. So we started getting them to farmers markets, festivals. We opened our first location in Sherman, Phoenix in 2018. And kind of the rest is history. We kind of just grew from there.
Just kind of continuing to grow and grow and grow. So where do you have places now? What are we talking about? What's the next step for Funky Fresh?
So from the Sherman, Phoenix, then COVID happened. We had to figure out how to readjust and pivot, and we started to sell our spring rolls frozen directly to customers. And then we got into some couple local grocery stores. And then in 2022, we partnered with Palermo's, and they've been helping us expand our product. And now we are found in over 150 grocery stores in Wisconsin and Illinois.
How many different flavors do you have?
We got 4 flavors. We got our buffalo chicken and kale. I say kale, yeah. Chicken, broccoli, and mushroom, chicken club. And we got a sweet potato black bean, which is our #1 seller.
So is the sweet potato and black bean, is that your favorite because of the tie with your family?
It has to be. It's the OG roll. You know, my son says I'm shaped like a sweet potato. So you know what? That's fine. And that's going to be my OG flavor. That, for me, it has the most sentimental value because it's the firstborn of the company.
So what are your next steps? What are you looking to do with Funky Fresh now?
So now what we've done is 150 store tests. We've got a lot of feedback from our customers and being able to improve our product. And now we're looking at expansion. So our big goal for 2024 is to be able to expand nationwide, get our product out, get the best version of our product out, and get it out across the country.
All right, hit us with those 4 flavors once again.
All right, we got our buffalo chicken and
buffalo chicken and kale,
chicken club,
chicken
broccoli and mushroom, and the sweet potato black bean.
Sweet potato black bean. You can find them all around the Milwaukee area, different grocery stores all over the place.
Woodman, Syndics, Outposts, festivals. You go to funkyfreshspringrolls.com to check out a full list of where all our stores are at.
All right. Well, Truman, thank you so much for the time, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Again, and thank you to Funky Fresh for being part of RePackables.